Welcome to Equity in Focus. I am your host, Kevin Hooks. Today's guest is an extraordinary individual whose life story is a testament to the power of resilience and transformation. From the cotton fields of Alabama to the boardrooms of corporate America, she has overcome incredible odds and emerged as a beacon of hope and inspiration. Please join me in welcoming the author of Daddy's House, a daughter's memoir of setbacks, triumphs, and rising above her roots, Mildred Mills. Mildred, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
I I just want to dive right into it. The first thing we run into when we open your book is this incredible quote. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. Dr. Maya Angelou. What emotions did that evoke, and why did you put that at the start of the book?
I put that at the start of the book because it could not describe me better. You know, bad things happen to all of us at some point in our lives, some worse than others, and we're not trying to measure them. But I tell you what, if you just keep moving, you can get over those things. But if you just sit there stuck in the muck and the mire, you know, it just kind of sticks to you. So I put that in the front of that book because that's exactly how I feel. And she could not have expressed my feelings any better.
I typically don't play the Olympics or the tragedy Olympics, but I can tell you what, if it was a such thing, you'd be up on the medal stand because I can tell you after reading this book, some of the challenges that you've overcome, and you found peace and a smile. So it's not only a memoir, but it's a story of really profound transformation. So talk about what made you want to write such a personal memoir, but also make sure that it showed the beauty of triumph.
You know, as I stated earlier, we all go through some stuff. And I never, ever in my life, until I was well into my 50s, almost 60 years old, thought there was anything in my life worth writing about. But I actually, at one point in my life, I was kind of going through this little lull where I didn't have a lot to do. And I took this English class, and this woman at the beginning of that class said, by the end of the semester, we will all have written a short story, something profound about ourselves. And I thought, well, I'm going to drop this class because there's nothing profound about my life. And so I'm glad I didn't, because I went home and I started thinking, what am I going to write about? And I decided to write this short story entitled My Wall of Shame. And that was about my mother's, what I perceived to be part of my mother's story. And at the end of that semester, the instructor said, "Can I see you after class?" And I stopped to talk with her, and she said, "This is not fiction, but you don't look like a woman who's been abused. Who would take abuse?" I said, "Well, I wouldn't. I mean, you know." So, but anyway, I decided. Shortly after that, I started volunteering at this women's shelter. And I heard so many horrendous stories about these ladies that were just, I won't say they were stuck, but they were just so terrified. They were just paralyzed by fear, the fear of moving on without that person, their abusive person, or the fear of just not being able to care for their families. And so after a short while volunteering at that shelter, I went and talked to my mother. My mother was one of the most incredible people I have ever known. She was one of the strongest women I have ever encountered, and she was absolutely my idol. Certainly, I didn't agree with everything that I thought my mother did. And, you know, that's why I went and talked to her. I said, "I just want to know you, Mom. I want to know you from the first memory you have until today." And I had some very in-depth questions to ask her. And I told her at the beginning of our interview, I interviewed her for 4 hours and I taped it. And I said, "Someday I may write a book, Mom. And my story is no story without your story." And after my mom passed and after my father passed, I decided I'm going to write this book. And I just thought that there were so many things that I had encountered and overcame that I thought others could learn from those. And furthermore, I just wanted to heal myself. These things just get bogged down in your soul and you just wrestle with them. And then I told one of my grandchildren who said, I'm just never I'm gonna hate this person the rest of my life. I said, how about you write him a letter, even if you never send it, and unburden yourself with that, because it takes a lot of energy to carry that around.
Yeah, that's incredible advice, and set against the backdrop of Women's History Month that we're in the smack dab in the middle of. You talk about like how your mom with such reverence, but in the book, it's very clear that you didn't always feel that way. So talk about the importance of the journey of going, because it is ebbs and flows, it is peaks and valleys. So how did you go from leaving home at 18, glad to be getting away? And to the point where you really understood the real truth that made that of who your mom was.
I never walked a mile in my mother's shoes, but I did walk in my own shoes. And when you are in life, out there in the world, taking care of yourself, there isn't a day that passes by, even now, and even back then, that I didn't think of something that my mother said to me, like, do the best you can with what you have, or nothing beats a failure but a try. So it just gave me that. I just realized that she was a wise, wise person. And there was not another person that I met that I wanted to be like. I've never looked up to other people and said, oh, I'd really love to be like that person. I want to be like myself, and I want to be the best of myself. And actually, as I grew in my own journey, I realized my mother did the best she could. And in that interview with her, she told me exactly that. She did the best. I understood from speaking to her. I was 55 years old, but I
Mm.
understood from talking to her that she made the choices that she could live with, and the choices that she thought would be best for her in trying to raise her children. One of the things she said to me in that interview is, I never had a father in my home growing up. Now, her father was there when she was born and as a very young girl, but her parents divorced. And she said, I just thought it would be nice for my children to grow up with their father in the house. So, you know,
Wow. It's funny, we all go through our own particular journey, but you being with a third of 17 children, growing up in a place where you pick cotton, how did you find your independence?
well, it's funny that you should ask that. I had one of my sisters ask me probably 10 years ago or so. She said, you always seem so self-assured. And this sister is probably 12 to 15, she's 12 to 15 years younger than I am. And she said, how long after you left home did it take you to feel that way? And I got to thinking, I thought, well, I've always kind of felt that way. And I just remember my mother calling me too independent for your own good and hard-hearted Hannah. I thought, I don't know who hard-hearted Hannah is, and I don't know what makes me seem like that person. But so I said to that sister, I said, I remember being 4 years old, and I had dressed myself for Sunday school.
Mhm.
And my father said to me, I'm sitting on this chair in the kitchen, and you're too short for your legs to hang over. So my legs are straight in the chair, and my little feet are sticking up. And my father walks through there, and I'm smiling like I'd love to have a compliment of some sort, you
Right.
know. And he said, I didn't know you were so stupid. And so I thought, I've never heard that word before in my life. And I didn't know what it meant, but the way he looked at me and the way he said it, I know I wasn't supposed to be stupid. And I decided, well, I'm not going to be stupid. But he said to me, look at your socks. I had my socks. You know how the heel should be on your heel, but the heel was sitting on top of my foot. But anyway, so that made me stupid. And I thought, oh, well.
No
And I
grace
told
for
my
being
sister,
poor.
I said, yeah, at 4 years old, I've dressed myself because, first of all, there are two children older than me, and they're probably three younger than me. So who's paying me any attention? I've dressed myself and I'm sitting there ready for Sunday school. But anyway, I told my sister, I said, so from that point on, I just decided, I'm not going to be stupid. And I'm just but I think it's just something in me, you know?
But continuing that theme, sort of like just one of self-assurance, maybe even a little defiance. Is that what really helped you, I guess, survive is probably not the right word, but overcome some of the tragic events and experience that you talk about in the book?
You know, I am more like my father than I want to admit. In fact, I'm okay with being like my father because my father was a very proud man, and you could not, I don't care what you did, he just took pride in everything he did. He was the hardest working man I know. And while I didn't go around looking for a guy like my father, I knew what it meant. And he also treated me as though I could achieve anything without saying those words because of the work that he put on me and the things that he charged me with, like being a bookkeeper at age 6. I mean, who does that? He gives me a
Right.
little, he gives me a pencil he sharpened with his knife and a little tablet, you know, this little spiral notebook, one of those things that you stick in your pocket. And I'm to write these people's names on it and keep track of the folks that have paid him and the people who owe him. And and then later on, he charges me with taking care of the crop. I mean, being his bookkeeper for the cotton field. So, and charges me with picking more cotton than anybody else. So he showed me without saying a word that I could accomplish anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard a saying recently that your perspective can be your prison or it could be your passport. And I think about,
Ooh.
I think about when I was reading the story of you being kidnapped
Hmm.
and the experiences that you endured and how you decided during the experience, I'm going to see this differently. I'm going to take
Absolutely.
control. And
I'm
I
going to take back my power.
please talk to people about how important that is and how much that's helped in your transformation and growth.
Well, I was the keynote speaker at a church this past Sunday, and I talked about triumphing over setbacks. And as I'm writing, you know, as you write, I don't know if you're a writer or not, but as you write, these things just come to you. I guess it's that creative juice in you.
Mhm.
And I remember writing that speech out and thinking, as a young girl, I said to myself, you may rape my body, but you'll never rape my mind. You
Mhm.
know, so there's something, there's that no quit. I'm not gonna quit. And I don't care how much you beat me. And some of that might have come from standing there in that prom dress getting a beat and thinking, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. You
Mhm.
know, it as and I thought, you know, do your worst. I'm an oak by the river, and I'm never gonna. you're not gonna beat me down. I'm just gonna stand here, you know. So there's just that stubbornness, absolute stubbornness, and I know that stubbornness comes from both of my parents because my mom had to be somewhat stubborn to hang in there with my dad, and my dad had to be stubborn to be a man, a black man born in 1921, growing up in Jim Crow's South. And I don't know what he endured every day when he left that farm and when he took jobs in Mississippi or other places, riding with a pistol under the seat of his car when a black man was not allowed to have a permit to have a gun. And I just remember my mother saying to me once, she said, "I asked your daddy, aren't you afraid if you're caught about of being caught with that gun under the seat of this car?" He said, "No, because I would be afraid not to have that gun under there because at least if somebody comes after me, I will take somebody with me." So, you know, and he said it with conviction. My father was, I will never judge him for his worst incident. I will just not, because there was so much incredible about that guy that it trickles right through these veins of mine. And oh, thank God for that.
So, yeah, I noted the 357 on the front under the front seat when I was reading the book. I'm from Oklahoma, so I'm very familiar with that reality. But before we move off this topic, um, What would you say to young women in particular, given that that it's Women's History Month, that have experienced these similar traumatic experiences? What would you say to any advice you would give them suffering through those kind of experiences and then having to live with it?
There are so many of us who have been violated. And I must say that it's not just women. Some men have been violated as well. So what I would say is we're not all the same and we don't all react to things the same way. But I would say just keep going and if there's anything in your mind that helps you to say, that happened to me, but I will not be a victim to it. And I won't allow that thing to define me. And I won't allow that person to change the way I feel about life. Because if you are positive about life in the first place, and I also talked in my talk on Sunday, I said, sometimes we don't listen to that wee small voice that says, this doesn't feel right. But we go ahead and we do something out of fear or because I actually didn't want to hurt somebody else's feelings. And I think, you dumb clown, they sure didn't worry about hurting your feelings. But I would just say, God, all those awful things that happened to you. I guess I had an aunt once that said she wanted to leave her husband, but God spoke to her and said, put on one side the pros of leaving the pros of this man, and on the other side the cons. And she said, I got to stacking up all those pros. And I thought, And she said my con stack was so small. So I guess I would say just think about what you learned from that experience, not just that you were violated. What can you take away from that experience that might help you to maybe not? And I wouldn't dare say that anybody made a mistake by being in that position because usually you didn't rape yourself or you didn't violate yourself. Somebody else did that. But what is it about? Just have a little bit more discernment. That's exactly what I I look in the eyes of anybody that approaches me, and I can very quickly kind of keep moving when I see those snake eyes.
Right. No, I appreciate that and the importance of making sure that everyone understands that something like that is not their fault. They have no
Absolutely.
blame in it. And that, it's really challenging and it takes, something different to even be able to talk about it, let alone be able to move past it. So I just really appreciate you having the conversation and the wisdom, offering the wisdom to the people that may be listening and need to hear those things. So we transition from the more personal and what we like to give advice to our listeners and our viewers about how, what their journey might look like from where they came from to where they want to go. And yours has been a winding road. So how did you go from cotton farm to IT exec? Talk about that journey and the beauty of that journey.
Well, the journey started, like you said, in a cotton patch. And I knew very young that God didn't put me on this earth to be a cotton picker. I thought, who would do that to a little child, or who would do that to anybody? But anyway, so I always had my eyes forward to think, okay, where is there that isn't in this cotton field? And I've always been a reader, even when I couldn't read the words on the page. And I just remember books like Jack and the Beanstalk, and there's this poor little guy whose mother, the family was poor, and he sold a cow. And of course, the mother is very upset that he sold that cow, but in return, he had these beans and these beans happened to be a beanstalk, and he was able to climb up and steal some gold from. So there are just so many ways to get yourself out of that place where you are if you're willing to work for it, be creative about it. But going from that cotton field to the IT world, I've had one thing, I've got another one of those sayings that I myself thought you might be smarter than me, but I guarantee you can't outwork me. And there is no way I can still see without even looking back. I could see that cotton patch once I left there, and I was never ever going back. So I worked my backside off to make sure that I would never go back. And I always say also that Even if I was begging bread, I would have never asked my parents for anything because I didn't want them to think that I couldn't make it on my own. They had given me everything I needed when I left there. And I said I'd sleep in a pasteboard box and cover up with a croaker sack before I went back home, before I went back there. Now, I loved my parents and I would always visit, but I was not going back there to live because I didn't want to live under their rules. But anyway, so my parents gave me the opportunity. My dad took me to Ohio from that cotton patch and paid my tuition in full in cash in 1969. And so he gave me more than a foot in the door.
Yeah.
They gave me everything I needed to be successful. And it was up to me to make dang sure that I made the best of that. So I always, like I said, kept looking ahead to find out, okay, what's that next opportunity? And when my dad dropped me off, he gave me $100 and he said, this is for now. That was in June. And but when the crops come in the fall, we'll send you some more. He never sent more. I never expected or asked for more because when I was in school, I saw this sign on the door that said Monique Models wanted. And I thought, and they were going to pay you and you might get some free clothes. So so I hauled my hiney in there and asked some questions about that modeling job. And before you know it, I'm a model and I'm making my own money. And I get some highly discounted clothes as a perk for being a model. So even though I had a couple setbacks, in college, I got pregnant and I had my daughter and so forth and so on, but I had that education behind me, and I had also gotten a year of college. So, but I just kept looking forward to see, okay, how do I keep moving forward without looking back and having regrets?
Yeah. You mentioned how your parents started you off and they gave you all the things that you needed and you weren't going back. A lot of us, sort of that are represent those who quote made it, so to speak, experience some of the challenges you experienced with family needing money and having to make the tough decision to either show tough love or just say no because it's rather than, it becomes a handout rather than a hand up.
Yep.
Help people understand how you came to some of the decisions you came to and how beneficial those decisions were when you decided to show tough love.
Well, showing tough love. Well, I was happy that my parents didn't have to show me tough love because they gave me that opportunity and I took advantage of it. But showing tough love, unfortunately, some of our children today, I think, take a look at us and say, "Oh my gosh, look at all that stuff they have, and tomorrow I'm gonna have that." And I don't know, and there is no plan. There's no plan to get to that place. And there's no thought of, well, how did you get there? And the thing I've said to each of my grandchildren is, you saw where I came from because that farm still sits there. And I picked cotton to get where I am today. And I didn't get to where I am by asking other people to help me realize my dreams. I said, you've got all these dreams, go work for them, and stop asking people every time you need something. Well, I need a loan for this. You don't need a loan. What you need is for somebody to give you something, and you're not going to pay that loan back anyway. So I'm absolutely going to say no. One of those grandchildren said to me, said, well, Grandma, we'll say no. And when you say no, it's for our benefit.
Mm.
So, you got to show tough love and say, the world isn't going to be kind to you always. You have got to get out there and make it for yourself and quit looking and blaming everybody for your downfalls. Because if you look yourself in the mirror, you will normally see who's responsible for your success or your failures. So stop being a victim. People are sick and tired of victims. In fact, I don't even want to hear about your victimhood. So I don't know. That might sound tough, but they will also say that I am a very kind person. And I can say no, just so kind. I can say yes and be very, they have to show me that they have really, really just saying that, Well, I lost my job last month and I haven't found one. Well, what have you been doing well, why did you get yourself to the point where you didn't have a nickel anywhere that you could help yourself out? You're already in your 40s or 50s or whatever. That's time enough for you to get yourself together.
So yeah, and that's great. Talk about getting yourself together. One of the things that really stood out to me was your career trajectory included crossroads, like a lot of people I think experience, where you have to decide, do I go left or go right? And I'm particularly talking about a time when you left a job and you were regretting leaving the job and you got counsel from a partner saying, no, you need to go and do this other thing. And you did it, and it was a part of the pathway to success. Help people understand like the benefit of believing in themselves and sometimes having to take risk.
Oh, believing in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, people know it because you can look people in the eye and say, well, I can do all these things. And you're sitting there with all that fear in your eyes. But if you go in there and like, for instance, if you don't have a job and you desperately need it, I'll give you an example. This other, the way I ended up being a keynote speaker at this church. In fact, it was Antioch AME Church in Stone Mountain. I was there one Sunday with selling some books. And this pastor was just looking kind of weary and lost. And I was looking weary and lost because the people that we were with were just standing off to the side. And I just walked up to this guy and I said, I've just written my memoir. I'd love to gift you this copy. And he looked at me like, I'd never met that man. I'd never been in that church before. But so now that we know each other and he's had me in his church, he said, you just have that gift of discernment. And I
Mm,
said, oh, really?
mm,
But anyway, so um, just having confidence in yourself, because what is the worst that can happen
mm.
if you ask for an opportunity and you don't get it? You didn't have it in the first place, so go to the next one.
Yeah.
I yeah, I'm serious. Don't let that be your plan A through Z. Have a plan A, have a plan B. And sometimes I remember leaving Dayton, Ohio, left my job. My husband and I both quit our jobs, moved to Atlanta without jobs. But I tell you what, I had so many resumes in the pipeline. But once I got here, and I had three jobs within a year. The first one was, oh my God, this horrible pay cut. The second one was, okay, I think I got back to where I was when I left Dayton. And then that next one was this giant leap. I had put out so many resumes that the calls were coming in. But just have faith. I mean, just have faith in yourself. I'm not saying be a Christian and say, oh God, help me, please. Well, help yourself.
No, I love that. And before we close this wonderful conversation out, any advice for aspiring young writers who really, believe that they have a story to tell and they want to put it out? Any advice on how they should go about doing just that?
I never was an aspiring writer. I mean, an aspiring young writer for sure, but I have always kept notes and I have, to express joy and pain or any other emotion, I usually write. And I write these, what I call poems. I don't know if anybody would consider me a poet or not, but I tell you what, I write it down. And at some point in my life, I look back at all those notes and all that writing, and I thought, this is pretty good. But I also have been this avid reader that I told you about. And I thought, well, what makes a good author? What makes a great book? And I would look in the back of these books and I saw these people had these qualifications. And to the person almost, they had some background in a writing, like they had a bachelor's in creative writing or English or something or other to help them, just just get to the writing part. And I would say, so I went and got a master's in creative writing because, and certainly that's not something any and everybody is going to do. But I thought, well, why not? I don't want to just write a book. I want to write an incredible book and I want to write an incredible story. But I also had an excellent mentor who helped me through that. And so when I read a book, there's hardly a book that I ever read that I don't find an error in. And I don't want to have, and it's okay to have an error or so because we can't catch them all. But you find a book riddled with errors, I'm not going to finish that book.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that the writing was excellent. I don't want it to be perfect, but I did want it to be excellent. But I would just say, write down your thoughts, have some cohesive thoughts. And that transition from one place to the next is probably the most important thing that you can do in a book, is to not just bounce around. People say, well, gosh, this thing gave me a whiplash. You're jumping from place to
Right.
place without any cohesive reasoning for doing. But I just think a story that not everybody can tell a good story. Lots of people can write a book, but to tell a story and have a beginning, a middle, and an end that takes you from that beginning place to the end, and you just wish, oh my God, I wish that book hadn't ended. I
Yeah.
would just say, keep writing, keep thinking, keep reading, really, really keep reading. Read those things that you love and mimic those people that you whose work you really enjoy.
Yeah, I know it's clear to me that you've embraced the principles of combining education, hard work, and a no-quit attitude because the book is riddled with those truths. So before we get out of here, tell the audience, anybody listening, why should they read your book?
I think one of the things that if you go to Amazon and read those reviews, people will tell you why they read, what they thought after they read the book. And there are even those who picked it up and said, oh, Daddy's House, what's that about? But then they left just absolutely moved. First of all, I think you should read my book because it is a story of absolute owning your stuff. I mean, whatever we go through in life, most of us, I mean, you just ought to own your stuff. And I think that this book is one that will take you through the ups and the downs and the goods and the bads. And I think that you will leave thinking, I'd really like to get to know that lady. I want to meet her. In fact, I would love to be at your book club or to speak at your whatever. I mean, I would just love to do that. But I think you should read this book because, first of all, it is a story of will and it is a story of truth. And I think that becoming vulnerable and just showing the hurt and the pain and also being able to show joy is an amazing way to take a journey.
Wow. And with that, everyone, please go out and get Daddy's House, a daughter's memoir of setbacks, triumphs, and rising above her roots. Miss Mildred, I really appreciate your time today. It's been a wonderful conversation, and your book is fantastic. So thank you for joining us on Equity in Focus.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me, Kevin.